More fundamentally, the government's approach to national security is unbalanced and has led Jamaica to becoming an increasingly violent and dangerous place. Generally speaking, Jamaica needs to tackle the deep inequalities in our society, investing in repairing the most egregious manifestations of that inequality.
Blessings everyone, this is Lady Be Unstoppable. Welcome to another video. If it's your first time, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like and share. Yes, in this video you will be hearing from Mark Golding, the leader of opposition. So there was a press conference and he had a mandate where he's asking the Minister of National Security to improve the crime situation in Jamaica or he should resign. Guys, I want you to listen to this video for yourself. Let me know your takeaway. Let me know what you think. Drop your comments in the comment section in a respectful way. Thank you for watching and watch the video till the end.
Yes, good morning. And let me say a very happy new year to those of you who this is the first time we're coming in contact. And I do hope that this year will bring you more than prosperity, but it will bring you a better quality of life with safety in your homes and in your communities. This press conference is being called in an environment where there is palpable fear within the country, as persons are not sure about their own security and that of their loved ones. Additionally, persons have also been dealing with the issue of the COVID virus, and now we're being told that we will have to pay increased fees to do our transactions. So the opposition is here this morning to highlight the failures of the government and, of course, to put forward practical solutions for these complex issues that are confronting us. First up, we will have the leader of the People's National Party and the leader of the opposition, the MP from South St. Andrew, Mr. Mark Golding. Please make him welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Campbell, General Secretary. Greetings to my colleagues who are here this morning, Dr. Maurice Guy, MP Fitz Jackson, Senator Peter Bunting. I will be making a presentation on the issue of crime and violence, and MP Fitz Jackson will be making a presentation on the issue of fees for banking transactions. Dr. Guy and Senator Bunting are here to answer questions when we have the Q&A after the presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, those who are present online, the prolonged use of states of emergency in parts of the country from 2017 to 2020 was ineffective, and the initial positive relief that it brought to the hopes of the people was, over time, reduced to disappointment and frustration as they witnessed the shifting of violent murders to other parts of the country, like the squeezing of a balloon, without any meaningful reduction of murders at the national level. Several thousand young men were detained for extended periods without being charged, some of them for over a year. Many of them lost their jobs, creating hardships for their families and blighting their prospects in life. Very few guns were recovered. Very few of the thousands of detainees were ever charged for serious offenses. The criminal gangs remained intact, simply moving to areas where the security forces were absent. No sustained benefits to our society in terms of long-term reductions in the rates of violent crime were achieved by the states of emergency. The visible signs of the ineffectiveness and futility of the SOEs, with stationary manned checkpoints that seemed quite useless in combating crime happening close nearby, coupled with the poor working conditions of the police in particular, in the SOE areas meant that national support for the SOEs fell dramatically to below 50% as established in credible polls. In 2019, the opposition obtained a legal opinion from one of the most senior and respected Queen's Counsels in Jamaica, who advised that the Constitution does not permit the use of states of emergency as a policing tool over a sustained period of time to tackle Jamaica's long-standing crime problem. In 2020, a Supreme Court judge on a habeas corpus application, that is, an application brought by somebody who is in detention for the court to give them their liberty if they are not charged. The Supreme Court judge ordered the release of a number of men who had been detained for several months without charge under the SOE. In his lengthy written judgment in that case, the Supreme Court judge was quite clear in articulating that certain specific provisions in the regulations which governed the SOE at the time violated the Constitution, as well as questioning the use of states of emergency as part of the toolkit for ongoing law enforcement. In November 2021, after a break for over a year, including the general elections of 2020, the government declared states of emergency in parts of Western Jamaica and the southern belt of the corporate area. However, within the first 14-day period of those SOEs, murders continued unabated, including in the states of emergency areas themselves. Prior to those November 2021 SOEs, the government had amended the Emergency Powers Act and also amended the regulations for the November 2021 SOEs so that they were in a different form from the regulations that had been used for the SOEs between 2017 and 2020. I therefore obtained another legal opinion on the new SOE regulations, again from the same senior and respected Queen's Counsel, whose advice is that the new regulations for the November 2021 state of emergency violate the Constitution in a number of important respects. In keeping with our view that the states of emergency are not an effective mechanism for fighting crime, and that the constitutionality of such use of states of emergency remains in serious doubt, and our belief that there are other lawful strategies that can and should be deployed to get crime under control, we did not support the extension of the November 2021 SOEs beyond their initial 14-day period. Our action in Parliament was in keeping with our oaths to uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of Jamaica. The legal opinion on the November 2021 SOE regulations has been shared with the private sector organization of Jamaica and with the Minister of National Security. My understanding is that the SOE regulations are to be reviewed by the new Attorney General in light of the serious issues affecting their constitutionality that have been raised in that legal opinion. But the state of emergency regulations are one thing. The bigger issue is whether the state of emergency can lawfully be used in the manner that the government has been employing since 2017 as their main ongoing strategy for tackling Jamaica's crime problem. The Constitutional Court in December 2021 heard a case brought by someone who had been detained for an extended period without charge in St. James under the SOE there. That case has squarely put the issue of the constitutionality of this use of states of emergency before the Constitutional Court for determination. We await the judgment of the court to provide guidance on this most important matter. And if I may, respectfully, I would like to urge the judiciary to try and expedite the delivery of judgment in that case so that we can get clarity on this critical issue that the nation needs clarity on. In the meantime, we urge the government to use the zones of special operations legislation far more extensively. The ZOZO has bipartisan support and provides a tool by which the military can join the police in securing communities that are torn with internal violence and are out of control. When a ZOZO is declared, the JDF personnel have full policing powers within the area of the ZOZO, and law enforcement in that area is under the joint command of the JDF and the JCF. We believe that the government's conception of the use of ZOZOs is far too narrow and limited. They have only used it in 7 small communities since 2017 when the legislation was passed. We believe that the ZOZO is to be viewed as a lawful alternative to the states of emergency, the main difference being that extended detention without charge is not permissible, and citizens do not lose their basic constitutional rights of access to the court to protect their liberty. There are also other critical pieces of crime-fighting legislation, such as the Enhanced Security Measures Act and a new Firearms Act, which the government committed to delivering on a timely basis as part of the consensus agreement which established CMOC, the Crime Oversight and Monitoring Committee, which is a bipartisan committee on which civil society is also represented. The government has been tardy and negligent, failing to meet the stated deadlines for this important legislation, which should already be in place, but has not even reached Parliament. The government needs to get its act together and bring those bills to Parliament immediately. More fundamentally, the government's approach to national security is unbalanced and has led Jamaica to becoming an increasingly violent and dangerous place. Generally speaking, Jamaica needs to tackle the deep inequalities in our society, investing in repairing the most egregious manifestations of that inequality if we are to achieve sustained improvements in our national security situation. There is no other way forward. The government's approach to national security completely ignores this reality. Crime prevention programs, critical ones like the Peace Management Initiative and Unite for Change, have been defunded or abandoned altogether with no effective replacement. This has been a deliberate policy of the government. Community action to prevent disputes from escalating into a series of reprisals must be a critical part of violence reduction strategy in Jamaica, but this has been ignored by the government. The HOPE program, which they promised to deliver and which seemed to promise much, has delivered very little and has now all but disappeared. Jamaica needs a national, well-funded, well-designed, holistic program to give the hundreds of thousands of youths who have been failed by our school system, to give them a chance to become productive citizens through mentoring, skills training, and life coaching. The education system, which is in crisis and is failing a substantial percentage of the children who go through it, needs transformation, especially at the early childhood and primary levels, so that all Jamaican children who move into secondary school can already read, write, and do basic arithmetic proficiently. There is no reason why our children should not be able to achieve that. They are bright, talented, and capable, but the system is failing far too many of them. The additional resources that have become available to the government because of the success of Jamaica's fiscal reforms over the last 8 or so years have been skewed heavily towards providing ships, aircraft, and other expensive capital equipment to the military. As needed as those things are, the police force, which has primary responsibility for law enforcement and fighting crime in our violent, torn society, has been deprived of critical resources to improve their operating capacity and effectiveness. The JCF has been operating with substantially less police officers than its established complement allows. Only yesterday, the Commissioner of Police stated that the force needs an additional 6,000 officers. The government's disdainful treatment of the police's long-standing claim for overtime pay has upset and demotivated rank-and-file police officers, whatever certain people would like to say about it. That is the reality. Instead of resolving that issue through good faith and respectful negotiations, that matter is at a stalemate, and the case that was filed by the police is heading to court instead of heading to the negotiating table for resolution. At a time when the country is in fear, as the daily death toll from violence is out of control, it is a travesty that this dispute remains a source of discontent and disaffection within the force, and the blame for that lies squarely at the feet of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Jamaicans, this government has totally mismanaged the national security of our country. Jamaica has witnessed a 10% increase in murders in 2021 and a 19% increase in murders over the first 3 or so weeks of 2022, with 112 people being killed in just 23 days. Jamaica cannot go on like this. There must be accountability for such poor performance in the critical area of our national security. Dr. Horace Chang's tenure as Minister of National Security has been an abject failure, leaving Jamaicans feeling frightened, hopeless, and in despair. He clearly cannot bring the vision, energy, and vigor and communication skills which that portfolio requires. We are therefore calling on the Prime Minister to relieve him of his duties in that portfolio and give someone else an opportunity to bring a fresh and hopefully more effective approach. Commissioner of Police Anthony Anderson is also hereby being put on warning. He is the main architect and promoter of the government's state of emergency strategy as an ongoing policing tool. No other commissioner of police before him has followed that unprecedented and what we regard as a dangerous path, abrogating the most basic and hard-won rights of Jamaicans in the name of ordinary policing. The constitutionality of his use of the state of emergency is in serious doubt. As I have already shown, there are other tools in the toolbox for him to use, and some others that the government needs to quickly deal with and address to provide him with, which should have been legislated for already. If the commissioner cannot find another strategic approach to getting the crime problem under control within the next 60 days, I think he must call it a day as well and allow someone else to take up the mantle of commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, party leader. And, recently I saw where the Minister of National Security said that he'd give himself a passing grade. I don't know of anybody else who's given a task and you have your performance decreasing, getting worse by 19%, and you come to the country to say you're giving yourself a passing grade. And for the Prime Minister to say he still enjoys his full confidence. And I hope that people are taking note. When I was on my way, an elderly lady said to me, when I see Fitzjackson, I should tell him to keep the faith and keep fighting. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome Mr. Fitzjackson.
Yeah. Thank you, General Secretary Dr. Dayton Campbell, party leader, opposition leader, and colleagues, members of the media, Jamaicans all. Let me also join in wishing everyone all the best, individually and to your respective families. Safe, healthy 2022, and indeed for you to all have real prosperity. And mention about prosperity brings me into the subject of the banking fees. As Jamaica, and perhaps the world is aware, this matter is not a new one. It has been one that been affecting Jamaican bank account holders for many years. Brought to the fore in Parliament through a private member's motion I tabled back in 2013. And I want to emphasize that. 2013, while the People's National Party formed the government. And what is the significance of that date line? Is that the issue was not brought to the fore to be contentious or in a partisan way. It was brought to the fore as a matter affecting ordinary Jamaican individuals, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and even the unemployed, pensioners, because banking is much like a utility service. Telecommunication, water, light, the roadway, everybody depends on the banking service, banking system and banking services for everyday life in modern societies. And therefore, it was and is imperative that we ensure that there's equity in the utilization of that service. And we must be mindful of the fact that banks, unlike any other business anywhere in the world, it makes its money, its profit from the use of other people's money, not their own. A manufacturer will borrow money, use their own savings, etc. Service provider the same, invest it, reap a profit, and that's it. In banking, and particularly deposit-taking institutions, they have a special privilege in society where the banks allow them to take the deposits and use it, invest it for making profit. What we have seen over recent times, the banks not being satisfied with their normal stream of income, which is from interest on loans and other instruments that they give, found a convenient way of exploiting the deposits that are placed in their charge for safekeeping. And if you read Section 126 of the Banking Services Act from 1964 and renewed in 2014, it gives the banks a responsibility to keep the deposits safely and to preserve the value, at least the face value of what is in deposit. What the banks have done unilaterally is to impose a myriad of fees to extract from their depositors. On the surface of it, small amounts, but cumulatively significant amounts. And so you will find that over the last year, for example, over $50 billion is earned by the banks in fees. Fee income now become roughly 40% of the bank's revenues. So the normal practice of banking has been transformed to the disadvantage of the depositors. So $50 billion is shifted from ordinary Jamaicans' account into the pockets of the owners of these deposit-taking institutions. Each year, not a one-off, each year over $50 billion of unemployed persons, marginally employed, small business, micro business, retired pensioners, monies have been extracted, and the government, and in fact, across administration, because it didn't start since this government came into office. It started before. But when the government became aware of the extent to which it was impacting depositors, nothing has been done. And so we as parliamentarians, all 60 of us, we have a collective responsibility to protect the ordinary Jamaicans. And so what was set out is the promulgation of an amendment to the Banking Services Act that establishes a minimum service package. And I want to underscore that. A minimum service package, which in summary says all deposit holders must enjoy a minimum level of service from the banks licensed by the government of this country. And what is entailed in that minimum service package? Since the banks get the benefit of the deposits in their accounts, they should allow a minimum amount of transactions per month, per year, without any fees. They must be able to make deposits into their accounts without any fees or penalties. They must be able to withdraw from their accounts at their convenience without being penalized by way of a fee. They must be able to make inquiries into their accounts without a fee. And on that note, we must be reminded that most, if not all, banks have terminated passbooks. So no longer the depositor have a record of their own issued by the bank or updated by the bank. They have to go to the bank to get that information and to know what is in your account, what's going on. You either have to go online if you can, and if you can't, as was said, you're on your own. Argument done. That's the reality. And we simply say, allow deposits, since banking is so important to the ordinary Jamaicans and to the country, because indeed we need banks. Banks is not only an opportunity for owners to make profits, but it's a way of mobilizing capital for national development. So there's no ill will against banking. All we're all about is fairness and equity, so that those who own banks and operate banks make a profit. And that's the incentive for doing business. But at the same time, don't make it at the expense of the depositors. So in recent times, we see there's a flurry of interest in the bank fees following on the announcement of the two largest banks, BNS and NCB, to increase their fees once again. And I want to emphasize, it is not new. It is not new. They have increased their fees further. The bill in question has been retabled by me in Parliament last year, October, after the general elections. And it was kept on the order paper since its defeat in 2018. And I must underscore the point that though the provisions of the bill was on a bipartisan basis, after having widespread consultation in the Parliament through the Economy and Production Committee, with all the commercial banks participating, all the deposit-taking institutions participating, members of the public, consumer groups, the widest level of consultation took place to reach that body of recommendations that have been now transformed in a bill on a bipartisan basis. Minister Shaw signed the report with those recommendations. Minister Samuda signed the report with those recommendations. Minister Vaz signed the report with those recommendations. They signed to say government act on these, put them in action. But when it came to voting, to make what they said ought to happen, they abandoned the people and they surrendered to the interests of the banks. And that bill was defeated 30-29. And it was on straight party line. All members of the government, including the Prime Minister, voted against it. All members of the then opposition voted for it. That's the reality. So I was a bit excited, but confused when I read a release that the party of the government is calling on the government of the party to act. So, I don't claim to be the brightest person around. So if somebody can explain who's talking to who or not, then I welcome that clarity. But nonetheless, I do welcome all efforts, right, to correct it. Because as I said a moment ago, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a PNP JLP issue. This is not opposition government issue in terms of what is to be done. This is a people of Jamaica issue. What has happened is that the government has politicized it by collectively deciding to vote against it. But having said that, I must out of earnest indicate that all the members of parliament and the government side is not against the bill. I have spoken directly to a number of them who are in full support of the bill. But the government, led by the Prime Minister, has decided to apply the whip and to whip all of them in line against their own conscience. Against their own conscience. So on one hand, I sympathize with my fellow members of parliament. On the other side, I just call upon them to bear in mind that when it's all over, we all individually have to take responsibility for our actions. And there comes a time when each of us have to man up, or woman up. We have to put Jamaica first. We have to put the ordinary persons first in this country. Look out for the small business operator. Stand up for what is right, if it is even for once. For Jamaica's sake. This is our 60th year of anniversary. Let us demonstrate that we are prepared to make a difference going forward. And so I appeal to my colleagues on the other side, because all 14 of us on the opposition side stand ready to say yay when that bill is put to the vote. Can we get at least another 16, 18 on the other side? Don't have to be all, because we're in a democracy where majority rules. Can we get some that have the balls, the courage to stand up for Jamaica? Have the fortitude to stand up for our fellow Jamaicans, particularly at this time in the pandemic. We know of the economic hardships confronting this country. To deal with health, to deal with national security, call for resources. Things are tough, notwithstanding what the Minister of Finance says. Things are tough out there. And those of us who are members of parliament and our feet on the ground, we know. Things tough. Take little of the pressure off the ordinary persons. Don't cause a person that if I pay you $2,000 for a service and I go to the bank to change the check, you only leave with about $1,500 because the bank skim off $500 for themselves. And it's not their money. It's the account holder's money. Why? What is so egregious in this bill that the government refused to pass it? Tell us why. So my friends in the JLP, ask the Prime Minister what is so egregious in the bill, why he has instructed the leader of government business not to put the bill to the vote and not to allow his members on that side to give support to that bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Jackson. And as they would say, history will absolve you. You know, okay. I too was a little bit flummoxed, confused about the release I saw yesterday. But it underscores the point that this government listens to no one, not even to their own members. So they have to try and speak to them through a release to the country. And every time a politician from the PNP speaks on a matter, they say that it's being politicized. It is not true. We're politicians, yes, but we can have genuine concerns as we do in relation to crime, COVID, the banking fees. It would be You seeing a doctor at the hospital with a stethoscope, would you question his motives? No. That's what you expect to see, right? But politicization of these issues are actually what the Jamaica Labour Party does. You will well recall when the Prime Minister said that if you vote for the PNP, you may lose your life. And that if you vote for the Labour Party, you'll be able to leave your windows and doors open. I can recall him telling Senator Bunting that he shouldn't come here with this nonsense about crime is a everybody problem. Right? Take some responsibility. Went on to say that, yes, crime and health are national issues, but if the government is going to come to you and say it's a everybody problem, what's the point of having a government? He actually said these things, you know. Minister Shaw said that when the PNP is in power, we have pure pestilence on the land. These are the things that have been said by these members before. That's not what we are doing here today. We're here today with genuine concerns for ourselves, our loved ones, and for our brothers and sisters of this country. And so at this point in time, if there are any questions, comments from the media, we'll be willing to take those. If they are not, then let me also remind Dr. Chang that if Prime Minister Holness is not brave enough to reassign you, because I realize that he's afraid to make certain moves. So like Bobby Montague is the leader of the black section of the Labour Party, doesn't really want to trouble you. If he doesn't want to trouble you because you're a General Secretary, I'm asking you, Minister Chang, to do the honorable thing and to resign from the post of Minister of National Security and allow somebody who has some vision and some testicular fortitude to come forth and do the job. Questions?
We have a question from Siobhan Campbell. Siobhan, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. To Mr. Golding, the question regarding the extension or widening the usage of zones of special operations, both the Prime Minister and the Commissioner of Police have been on record to suggest that the resources to allow that currently do not exist, and they will widen the use of the ZOSOs as those resources allow. Do you feel that's a fair response, or do you believe that the resources do exist for this to be done?
Thank you, Siobhan. I don't accept that argument. I think it's a false argument. The zones of special operations are primarily a tool of law enforcement to get areas which have chronic problems of crime and violence that have flared up and where people are unsafe and need additional security to get them under control. They have, the ZOSOs, an additional aspect, which is that the Social Investment Committee is established to look at the longer term challenges to social cohesion in that zone and what can be done about it, and a plan of action is put in place. In terms of the phasing of any investments, that naturally has to fit within the fiscal capabilities of the government at a given point in time. But that cannot be an excuse for not using a lawful tool to provide safety and security and save lives. They can phase the investments to fit the capacity of the government to pay for it, but there must be a response to the problems that the people are facing of a lack of safety and of serious jeopardy in their homes. And the question of budgetary support for that is not really an issue, because in the same way that states of emergency require the deployment of police and soldiers, and the support of that on the ground is the same way as applies to ZOSOs. And the social investment piece, which is very important, must be phased in accordance with the capacity of the government in its fiscal accounts to pay for it.
Minister Shaw said it best, phase it in. MP Jackson wants to make an additional point, so I'll just allow him to do so at this point.
Ladies and gentlemen, and the point made earlier on by the leader of the opposition regarding the Crime Management Oversight Committee. I hear quite often people ask, what is it that the opposition is doing to deal with crime and violence in the country? Firstly, we have one government at a time. The People's National Party is not the government. Yes, we have some responsibilities in the governance, but we are not the government. We don't have the authority to institute policies and programs of the government. And in order to do that, you need to be equipped with the pertinent and time-sensitive information, which is not at our disposal. In fact, when I sat on the National Security Council, those information were kept away from me. I only was invited when there was announcements to be made. So I was privy to it before you got it in the public. But I knew nothing that you don't know. That said, to the Crime Management Oversight Committee, we in the opposition have long stated for years now, dealing with crime and violence in the country is a whole country issue. And we stand ready to play our part. When the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce made a proposal for the stakeholders consultation to look at a range of approaches to deal with the crime situation in the country, the opposition stepped up. We responded. We participated. The government resisted it. And the records are there to prove it. After much public pressure, they came to the table. Don't forget that the opposition held a crime management summit at the conference center without the government. And based upon public pressure, they decided to come. And a second was kept with the government. And out of that, broad-based coming together of government, opposition, stakeholder groups, of business, religious groups, all kinds of different civil society groups, under that umbrella. And we signed off on a number of issues to be dealt with and the responsibilities assigned. You please, ladies and gentlemen of the press, you are all good investigators. Not crime investigators, but you're information gatherers. Check the records. See how much of those undertakings given by the government has been fulfilled since that agreement was signed. So I say that to say, when we ask what the opposition is doing, we are doing what we are allowed to do. And Minister Guy can point to the various recommendations, but because it comes from the PNP, it's not embraced, at least initially, until reality drives home further. So I just want to emphasize the point that the People's National Party has always been at the table, ready to participate, make our contributions, make recommendations, and most, if not all, go by the wayside. And we can't act on them then, now, but we will act on them when we form the next government. Right? So I just wanted to give that clarity.
Yeah.
We have a question from...
Before you take that question,
Okay.
I just want to add that we have been calling for a resumption of the Vale Royal talks. From the budget in 2021 March, I called for it, and I've consistently said we are willing to have behind closed door, authentic discussions with the government on any issues of concern where a bipartisan approach is required, to reinforce the work of CMOC if necessary by some additional political will around what needs to take place. I reiterate that I am willing to have a meeting with the Prime Minister, with his team and mine, to discuss these issues and others. I called him in December before Christmas to ask him for a meeting. He told me he was writing me a letter, and after the letter, we would have a meeting. I still haven't received that letter over a month later. I reiterate, we are willing to have dialogue. We believe that the country needs a joint approach, but we must also bear in mind that we are parliamentarians and we are committed to upkeeping, defending the constitutional rights and the constitutional provisions that govern the country. And we cannot forego that. And as long as those remain in serious doubt, we will have a problem with using states of emergency as the primary tool for policing the situation. There are other tools available, and we must use them well, use them decisively, get the JDF fully involved in all areas where a joint response is required. The law provides for it already. Let us do it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Golden, whenever there's a rise in crime, there's always a call for the commissioner to step down. Do you think that's the right approach?
It depends on the situation. I don't know whose question that is, but it depends on the situation. In certain instances, I think it is appropriate for the accountable person, the person with whom the buck stops, to step down if they have manifestly showed themselves unwilling or unable to provide an effective response in carrying out their duties. Today, I have not called for the Commissioner of Police's resignation. I have said I would like to see within 60 days a marked improvement in his strategic response to the situation on the ground. He has been entirely reliant on states of emergency, the constitutionality of which are in doubt. I would like him to put an end to that dialogue, stop whinging about the fact that he doesn't have access to it, and use the tools that he does have more effectively. None of his predecessors relied on states of emergency to try and secure the country. And I can remind the country that under the 4 years of PNP government between 2012 and 2016, the levels of murders in the country were significantly lower on average than they have been since the JLP assumed office.
Sir, could you describe the role of the commissioner? Could you describe? Could you describe the role of the commissioner? His approach to what he's doing, his work so far. What has been doing? Yes, assess what he has been doing. So how do you feel about?
I will let our spokesman on national security respond to that. I think the results speak for themselves. So I don't question his ability as an individual. He was chief of defense staff. He's a soldier, a career soldier. He was never trained as a police officer. He's a career soldier. And, you know, when we were in government, he was chief of defense staff and we enjoyed a good working relationship. And I enjoy a good personal relationship with him. But the results in terms of his tenure as commissioner speak for themselves. And when states of emergency were being deployed between 2017 and 2020, the national murder rate remained unacceptably high. There's no acceptable level of murders, but it was significantly higher than it had been before the JLP assumed office, significantly higher. And in recent times, we've had in 2021 a 10% increase, and we started the year now with a spike, 19%. So it's just murder and COVID are going now, and costs of living are killing the people and suffer from that too. So we need, I think, accountability. And where I see the commissioner continually saying he can't be effective without a tool, the constitutionality of which is in serious doubt, I say to him, look, change the narrative. Use the tools that are available to you. Let us see some positive results from that effort. And I think 60 days is a reasonable period of time for him to achieve that. Okay.
We also have a question from Gavin Riley from Our Today. Gavin, please unmute yourself and go ahead with the question.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Gavin, go ahead.
Yes. So my question is to Mr. Fitzjackson. In relation to the JLP's press release last night indicating an urge for the government to act on the recent bank fee increases by the NCB and Scotiabank. Mr. Samuda, in response to allegations of the government's non-participation in the bill in 2018, alleged that as proposed by you, the Banking Services Act was, quote, deeply flawed. Despite the JLP parliamentarians, all but one, voting against the act. Do you agree with this position?
No, I think that's just a distraction. The records are there to speak for itself. neither Mr. Samuda nor any of his colleagues pointed out any flaws in it. And bear in mind that the bill was subject to review by the Solicitor General's Department, the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. So from a legal standpoint, all the prerequisites were addressed in it. From a policy standpoint, all of their members signed off on it. As I said earlier on in my comments, the bill is merely a compilation of the recommendations that were arrived at in a bipartisan way.
Yeah.
In 2013, there was a private member's motion that was referred to the Economy and Production Committee for review, led by the Bank of Jamaica to do all the technical, analytical work on it. And it was deliberate to ask the Bank of Jamaica to play that role, because at the time, I didn't want the responses to be notional. I want the responses to be grounded in empirical data and practices. And I just want to say one other thing, ladies and gentlemen. If something is inherently, intrinsically wrong, it doesn't matter if 1,000 other persons are doing it. Why should a depositor be penalized to use their own money? That's an underlying principle. Why should a depositor who put their money in a bank for safekeeping have to pay a fee to use it when the bank has the opportunity to invest it and make profits for itself, without no obligation to share that profit with the depositor?
I just want to add one point to that. You know, I'm always wary of political persons who are highly tribalistic, saying things like, the bill is deeply flawed, without actually specifying any particular flaw in it. I was in the debate in Parliament when that bill was being debated, and nothing concrete or specific in terms of a flaw in it was cited by anyone in that debate. It was quite clear that the banks didn't like it and that the Minister of Finance was reluctant to support it, and the rest of it, the Prime Minister and others, fell in line. The bill simply provides a basic package of monthly transactions which can be entered into by depositors without incurring fees. The banks will continue to make very substantial profits from their normal operations, even when this bill is passed, if it ever is passed. And it will be passed under the next PNP government. But the point is that average Jamaicans, everyday Jamaicans who are facing the hardship of the times, should not have their meager deposits and their savings reduced just by simple things like putting the money in the bank or taking it out with an ATM. There's no justification for that.
There's a question from Raquel Mackenzie from Sleek Media. Raquel, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good morning. This is Raquel Mackenzie from Sleek Jamaica. Now, a question to Minister Golding. Aside from the proposed state of emergency and the resignation of the Security Minister Chang, what other measures do you propose can be used as crime-fighting tools to stem the surge in crime that we're currently facing?
I don't think you were listening to my presentation, dear. I went through that extensively. So, first of all, we are in favor of a much more broad and extensive use of the zones of special operations legislation than the government currently conceives it to be. We don't think it should just be used as a tool that is used in very small communities occasionally, but should be a response that provides safety and security where there are flare-ups and hotspots and brings them under control, and that the social investments that normally would follow thereafter can be paced according to the government's fiscal capacity. We also feel that the Enhanced Security Measures Act, which the government has committed as part of the consensus document for the CMOC, the Crime Monitoring and Oversight Committee, which they have failed to deliver to Parliament, needs to be delivered to Parliament quickly, immediately, because they're way behind with that. Similarly, the overhaul of the Firearms Act, which was another deliverable under the consensus document. These are critical things, but we've also spoken to the need for a more balanced approach to policing and to security, including empowering people on the ground in areas which are volatile and who have the capacity of influence and to mitigate disputes that would otherwise end up in reprisals through the peace management initiative. That needs to be refunded, reinforced and supported so that it can do what it was doing and has done successfully in parts of Jamaica hitherto. My own experience is that if you do not resolve those issues on the ground early, then what you end up with is an ever-escalating cycle of reprisals, which leaves a trail of dead Jamaicans in its wake. We need interventions like the PMI to effectively manage those situations. The police can't do it on their own. Similarly, we need to galvanize the churches and communities to be agents of peace. And they are already minded to do that, but that needs to be a part of a concerted national effort. So there's a lot that can be done. Unite for Change, which was a deliberate policy that sought to support unattached youths, vulnerable youths, and give them an opportunity for retraining, to start small enterprises, for mentorship, for remedial education so that they can get subjects if they're left schooled out any. That has been discontinued. We need a national approach like that to dealing with the hundreds of thousands of youths who leave school with no subjects and are on a corner digging out them hand middle and looking at what the gun can bring them in terms of opportunities. We have to give them an alternative way of life going forward, which is a reality of productive citizenship. These are critical things. We need balance in our approach to this problem. It is a deep and complex problem. But just taking away people's rights and detaining youth in the thousands without charge, that is not constitutional and it is not effective. Thank you.
Shanice Gibbs from IRFM is asking, she says, Transparency International 2021 Corruption Perceptions Index was released this morning. The country moved from 69 to 70 out of some 180 countries. Jamaica maintained its 2020 score of 44 out of 100. What's the opposition's response to this? And it's for you.
Yeah. I haven't seen that report, IRFM. I haven't seen it. But what I do know is that a lot of work has been put in to strengthening Jamaica's anti-corruption architecture. We, on this side, conceptualized MOCA, the Major Organized Anti-Corruption Task Force, which has been put into legislation, fully vetted force for tackling gang violence, organized crime, and corruption. We conceptualized a single anti-corruption agency that would have prosecutorial powers and the ability to access and share information with all law enforcement and tax agencies of the government, the Integrity Commission. It was brought to Parliament, it is now legislated. These institutions need to be fully empowered to do their work. They're new institutions, and all institutions which are new need some time to get fully established. But we would like to see them adequately resourced and let them do their work. And I believe the future should be better if they are allowed to do so. But there, Jamaica, a lot of things have happened, but I would say the seeds have been sown, but the fruits are not yet bearing, and people are frustrated. And there's so many instances of maladministration, nepotism, and corruption in the public sector, where boards appointed by politicians of this government have been treating the resources of public institutions as if they're their personal cash that they can basically loot for the benefit of themselves and their families and their cronies. And we, some of these things just require a more effective response from law enforcement. And we have really seen a lack of accountability there. And that is a disappointment to us all.
The final question is from Calvin Brown. He's from Wired JA. Calvin, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good morning. Two questions. Do you intend to retable the bill, effect of the bill in Parliament? What is the status of that now? And secondly, do we need to expand the police force in order to deal with the ratio to the ratio of citizens to police?
On the bill you asked, Mr. Brown, yes, it has been retabled from October last year after the general election. So it is on the order paper. It is just for the government to act. It's as simple as that. I don't even have to open my mouth one more time. It's just for the government to act.
For many years, we've been making a point that the ratio of security forces, in particular police officers, to population is on the low end of the scale in Jamaica. In fact, between 2015 and the beginning of 2021, notwithstanding the massive infusion of financial resources into the Ministry of National Security, there was no net increase in the number of police officers. It was over 2,000 below the established complement of the force. We made a point repeatedly that the high level of recruiting in the JDF, that increased the JDF by thousands, was really a misallocation of resources. The priority should have been to increasing the number of police officers who are trained in intelligence gathering, in doing criminal investigations, and in preparing cases for prosecution. None of these things are the strength or the core training, if at all, in the military. So we've really seen an inefficient allocation of the massive increase in resources, 10 times in terms of the capital allocations. And yet we're not seeing the results because the expenditure has not been in the priority areas.
Ladies and gentlemen, in wrapping up, I just want for you to bear the truth in mind. And I know that it is wise for a politician to have friends in the media. So I don't intend today to unfriend you. I've actually courted your friendship. But I just want for you to pay attention to the truth. Since 2016, the JLP administration, we had a minister then that said that his uncle is a Obeah man and I'm afraid of criminals. Not my words, his. A minister that ordered used cars, we haven't gotten all of them. A country that is ridden with gun violence, but yet still the FLA was giving gun permits to persons that have adverse tracings. Essentially persons that the police have some questions about. They gave them gun license. We have a government that has decided not to increase the number of police officers that they need to have in the society. Additionally, normally, if you're trying to get persons interested to join something, you try to ensure that the compensation package is good. You wouldn't engage in a public brawl with the persons within the police force, highlighting that they are overworked and underpaid, leaving very little room for motivation. You have a government that has not bring forward legislation, the Firearm Act. You have a government that has just not taken the business of the country seriously, but has majored in trying to just pull a wool over your eyes. So I'm simply asking, it's the same thing in relation to the management of COVID. You have cutting off ribbons for field hospitals that are still not open today. You have massive numbers of healthcare workers in the hospitals that have to be out on isolation, and we don't see any measure being put in place to ensure that you increase the testing and those other measures within the society. It is being phrased as if it is vaccinate or die, as if there are no other options. This, and then when the question is asked, what other measure? Because we are encouraging people to be vaccinated. What other measure? You're told that argument done. The argument cannot be done. The argument is just getting started. And we are stepping up the ante. We are stepping up our militancy in the protection of the Jamaican people to ensure that this government stays accountable to the people of this country. And so, Minister Chang, I expect before the close of pay today to hear that you have handed in your resignation. God bless you. Have a good afternoon.
That's the end of another video. Let me know what you guys think about the whole press conference in the comment section. Drop your like, drop a share, and also if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you will know when I have other videos like this or similar and when I go live. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe.